Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Um, why do I prefer U.S. real estate to Canadian real estate, especially in provinces like Ontario? I think it's pretty straightforward to me. I also get this question a lot of times. People ask me how, you navigate through the U.S. real estate market. That's what I want to talk about today. Drawing out comparisons between U.S. real estate and the Canadian one, and to share some of my experiences as well in how I've been handling both. Okay, before I go into that, I want to welcome everybody who's coming back as a returning subscriber. If you're new to this channel, I welcome you specially. My name is Frederick. I live here in the west side of the GTA. I'm a business owner, entrepreneur, involved in several sectors of the economy. And in this channel, I share pretty much my experiences here in North America, my investing experience, my business experience, and just share tips on how to go about pretty much doing certain things in that regard. Having said that, let us jump back right into it. Okay, so I started investing in U.S. real estate in 2021. Started from the state of Texas. At that time, I was already investing here in Canada, but I had always thought, about doing something in the U.S. and I'd already started doing a lot of research about it until I found something that, triggered me to just, jump, which I did. Interestingly, that first property that I bought in the U.S. was $60,000 US. 60,000 US dollars, yes. And I remember I also got a seller financing feature to it, where the seller was willing to fund about 85% of the cost. Yeah, about 85% of the cost, which just pretty much just allowed me to put, I think, $10,000 down, so a little over $10,000. At that point, it was a mind-blowing moment for me, because most of the transactions that I'd done in Canada prior to that time required me to put hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars down. And this was a transaction and in those Canadian examples, the prices of the properties were in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands, even closer to $1 million, right? So, and seeing something that cost less than $100,000 and simply just allowed me to put $10,000 down immediately caught my attention. And I was like, wow, so this is possible here in the US, but not possible in Canada, right? And I went into that transaction, always having this doubt in my mind that could this be true? Is there something else that I'm not seeing? And up to the end of the transaction, even up to closing, I was still hesitant. It was like a dream. Like, are you sure $60,000? Anyways, eventually the transaction happened. We closed on the property, and I took over that property, fixed it up, put a tenant there, started earning monthly revenue from it and all that. And that immediately got my mind open, and I felt, if this is possible here, then I can also explore the parts of the US and see how one can do stuff like this, replicate things like this in other parts of the US. And that immediately took my mind. I mean, my research led me to states like Michigan, led me to states like Ohio. I also looked at the western side of New York, and I also did investments there. Long story short, I pretty much just relied less on the Canadian market, because the Canadian market had gone haywire at that time. Prices were in the millions, especially when you're talking about places like the GTA here in Ontario. And it was a no-brainer. You can't be looking at doing real estate investments in a place where the price points are in their millions, compared to a place where you can find them under 100,000. And even if they're over 100,000, not by a wide margin. At that time, the most expensive real estate investment I'd done in the US was, I think, 125,000 US dollars, which in Canadian terms was just somewhere around the $150,000 mark, right? So if you look at it from a return on investment point of view as well, it was also a no-brainer, because as an investor, most, if not all investors, want to get a good return on their investment. They want to put in a small amount of money and make a good return on that investment. So even if you're not an investor, even if you're not mathematically savvy, you would know that when you put in some little amount of money, and you get your bigger amount of money, it means your return on investment is very good, is excellent, marvelous, fantastic. So for me, that was pretty much the focus. I wanted to put in the smallest amount of money, and I wanted to make the biggest return that I could make on that investment. So it was a no-brainer because of that, and my focus pretty much just shifted from the Canadian market to the US market. As time went on, the Canadian real estate market just went gaga, just went haywire, and it wasn't even a place to even look at. People have gotten burnt, people have gotten their fingers burnt, people have overbought in the millions. People have, gotten themselves in a very sticky situation. So it was, for me, another cue as to why it was important to focus on the US real estate market. At that time, I was just pretty much focused on buy and holds. You buy US real estate, you fix it up a little bit, make it nice, and then you rent it out, and then the tenant pays you rent, and then you try to keep your costs low. You have a property manager who manages for you, and you just make sure the assets, which is a property here, continues to generate that monthly return, monthly cash flow for you, which you use to take care of other things, right? But in recent time, the strategy has sort of changed, because now I'm going into flips. I'm looking more into fix and flips. I've identified new markets in the US as well that are good for that. Last year I took a trip to a particular state in the US to check out the viability of that state and that city, that specific city that I visited, for the purpose of fix and flips. So I'm looking at about 2 or 3 different states now in the US that are good for fixing and flipping properties, which is the next phase for me, because the rental market is good, but that just gives you some little cash flow on a monthly basis, which is good. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, it's good. But another strategy for real estate investing is to do fix and flips. The better thing about the fix and flip strategy is that it gives you probably invest a little more, but it gives you a large chunk of money at the end that you can do something good with. You can reinvest it if you want in order to grow your portfolio. The properties that aren't expensive. The markets that I'm looking at, one of those markets is the price range of the properties I'm looking at is somewhere with maximum amount is somewhere around maybe the $180,000 mark. You can even get properties under the $100,000 mark. The other city that I'm looking at as well is a little more expensive, but even in that city, you can still get properties, rundown properties that you can fix and flip under $100,000. I think the most expensive one that I've looked at so far in that particular city is just a little over $200,000. But if you've been in Canada long enough, especially in the GTA, you would know that these figures that I'm mentioning are nowhere near, not anywhere close to the price points that we see here in the GTA. Not even close, right? So, and of course, the plan is to have a profit margin of somewhere between 30 to 40%, if possible higher. The minimum I'm looking at somewhere around maybe 20, 25 and this is on a bad day, in a bad case where the investment doesn't give you that kind of maximum return that you're looking at, which is the 30 to 40% mark. So even on a bad deal, you're looking at somewhere minimum about 20%, which is still a good return on your investment. Very good return on your investment, right? So, and the bottom line, like I said, is that you don't need a lot of capital. You don't need a lot of money to invest in these fix and flips. Another big reason why I think the US market when it comes to real estate investment is better than the Canadian one is your access to capital. Access to capital in the US, even as a Canadian, is so much easier. As a Canadian, I already have access to capital without breaking an arm or a leg in the US. Compare that to Canada, where even in running my businesses and you're trying to access capital and they're telling you to bring your great-grandmother's birth certificate, they're telling you to bring this, they're telling you to bring that, that's not the case in the US. the US is way better, even in terms of the way they structure the financing. It's a vanilla financing, which simply means, unlike here in Canada, where if you wanted to take a loan for a mortgage to buy a house, they're going to subject it to what they call a term. So meaning it's for an initial period of 5 years, renewable after 5 years, and so you have to keep coming back to the banks to renew every 5 years. In the US, it's straight up 25 to 30 years. So you don't have to come back to the bank every 5 years to keep renewing, which is a pain, a big pain. Because the reason why the banks always want you to come back to renew is because they're trying to, in my view, they're trying to exploit you. And the reason why I use the word exploit is because they're trying to see if they can get more money out of you. So when you get a loan to buy a house in the US, it's straight up 25, 30 years. So you can imagine all those people who took mortgages during the COVID years. They got interest rates at 1.5%, 2%. They're locked in for the entire 30-year term. And they can plan, they know how much the mortgage is every month. They're not expecting any surprises because they know what the figure is at the end of the day. That is way, way better for an investor because it allows you to plan, it allows you to keep going, there are no surprises, nothing. So these are some of the reasons why I think the U.S. real estate market is very attractive, especially for people like me. If you want to know more, please hit me up. I'm happy to share some more details, give you more insight, and try to explain further as to why I prefer the U.S. real estate market compared to the Canadian one. So right now, I'm pretty much trying to liquidate most of my investments here in the GTA, and whatever is left of them, take the capital outside of the country to the US and invest it over there because I believe it's going to give me a better return on those investments. Okay, like I said, thank you very much for listening to me today. I hope you learned something from all this talk, and like I always say, man, if you hear everything every day and you don't put anything into action, it's useless. Okay, so take action. I'm here to support you in any way I can. I love you all. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Peace.